Frauen im Unternehmertum. Ehrliche Stories, Insights und Learnings exklusiv für euch. Foundermind, der Podcast für Female Entrepreneurship. Ich, Alicia Keipert, spreche jede Woche mit einer spannenden Persönlichkeit übers Gründen und Wachsen. Welcome to a new episode here at Foundermind Podcast. Today, the very first one in English. Most people in venture capital see the market from one side of the table, but our guest has seen both. From unexpectedly joining an investors meeting to building her own startup and now back in venture with a founder's perspective, she brings nearly 15 years of experience across the ecosystem. In this episode, we talk about what founders often misunderstand about VC, why networks still matter, and what it really means to invest with a founder mindset. All that and more with Anieke Lamers. So enjoy! Anieke, I'm so happy and glad that you're here and joining us for a new episode here at our podcast.
Yes, happy to be here. Always really exciting to speak to young entrepreneurial people. So happy to be connected.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. I think you have quite an amazing path and career behind you. So I think what's really interesting is your venture capital background. So what initially drew you to this industry, this world, and how did you get your start?
It's actually a really interesting story. I saw a very inspiring angel investor once at it was an event for a recruitment event, actually for a strategy consultancy, because back then I thought I was going to be a strategy consultant. And the speaker was an angel investor, and she was so inspiring, and it was a really great combination of humor with seriousness. And I was like, wow, she's amazing. I want to work for her. So I just approached her and I said, I would love to work for you, and I will even do it for free. And that's how bad I wanted to work with her, because I thought I could really learn a lot from her. And she said, okay, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And 1 week went by and 2 weeks went by and I still didn't hear anything from her. And at a certain point, I get a text message where she says, I'm sorry, I fell off a horse while I was horseback riding and I broke my leg very seriously. Do you have a driver's license? And I was like, okay, yeah, I do have a driver's license. Why? What? And then she said, do you want to be my personal driver? And I was like, oh, okay. And then she says, well, the benefits is you can drive me to all the meetings and you can sit in on all the meetings that I have with all the companies that I invest in and all the board meetings that I have and all these kind of really interesting meetings. And I will teach you all my skills and I will pay you for it very well. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. So that was my first touch point in the world of investing, because I never actually knew anything about that. I did study finance, but the normal career trajectory is that you would then work for a bank or some financial institution. And I really loved the entrepreneurial spirit of investing. So I did actually, after that sort of first job, started working for a bank, private equity bank, and then I quickly rolled into venture capital. And it's really nice because you get really a helicopter view of the market, because you see a lot of startups, sometimes 1,000 per year, and of course you also get to invest in a few of them. And then once you invest, you also get to help them build, or maybe sometimes there's a crisis that you can help them with. And in the past, I think, almost 15 years now, I've been in venture capital. I invested in over 20 companies, and more than 5 actually went all the way to exit. So I've seen the entire journey, like from first investment all the way to exit. And I also myself switched from being a VC to a founder for about 4 years. And then now I'm back in VC, so a little bit schizophrenic.
Yeah, but it's so exciting, and I think it's so nice to have both sides, and because I think then you can really tell from your own experience as a founder and also from your experience as a VC. So you have all coming together. And I think it's so nice that you mentioned that you had like a role model, because I think that's what's like really important regarding especially female empowerment, to just show role models to others, so they feel empowered and they see like, okay, what is possible and what can I also do? And they also had like those steps to make. So I think that's like quite a nice story to really like show, okay, role models are like, it's just like really important to have them.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the quote, you can't be what you haven't seen. So it really helps if you can see a role model who has done it, who's doing it, to step into that role yourself one day. Sometimes people even say that our imagination cannot dream differently than things that we have already seen. So it really helps to show those role models indeed.
You just mentioned that you switched from being an investor to being a founder. What drew you to making that step? Because I think it's a huge step for yourself if you like really into this industry, to just say, okay, now I'm stepping back. Am I doing like what I always see what others do?
Almost been in VC for almost 10 years when I decided to actually step out of it. And it's a hard decision indeed, because it's a little bit like a golden cage, right? Like it's comfortable, you have a salary, you still have quite a dynamic job. So it's not that often happening. We see a lot of the other way around, where founders, for example, exit their company and then start their own VC fund. But like starting your career in VC and then making a switch to a founder can be very scary. But for me, there were a couple of reasons. So I was almost nearing my 30s and I didn't have a mortgage. I felt my learning curve in the fund was kind of flattening. Like the only thing that I didn't do yet was become a partner. And I wanted to get a challenge and learn a lot, stretch myself, find out new areas where I could develop myself and learn where maybe also I'm not so good at yet. And yeah, I didn't have a family to take care of or like a mortgage to pay. So I was also a little bit more risk taking, I think, than maybe a lot of people have when they feel like they have that responsibility. So I took a leap of faith, and yeah, it felt amazing. It was really amazing to be a founder, but also feeling like constantly failing. I, as a VC, had to know a lot of things, and I feel like within venture capital, there's not that much room for error. Also, VCs, they won't typically brag about their failures on LinkedIn. Founders don't do that either as much, but they have definitely more a growth mindset where they sort of enjoy the learning process and become a little bit better and faster and than let's say their peers that are maybe not startups. So I think that is the secret to being like a successful founder, is to really enjoy the learning and the failing. And I really want to take that mindset back also into venture capital, which is also why I have a really special sort of passion project as well, which is called the VC Coach, where I coach venture capital investors to become more aligned with their personal mission and enjoy the learning and enjoy the challenges that come with being a venture capital investor as well. And also adopt a little bit more of this growth mindset that founders have within venture capital, to sort of bridge the two as well. So
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. But I think those are amazing parts to put together, because I think it's always like, okay, you have the startup mindset and you can learn a lot from that. You can also learn a lot from VC. You can also learn a lot from big firms. So I think bringing that all together is like really the point where you can really get forward and also, yeah, grow. So I think that's amazing. I think you have a lot of projects which are really cool. So I think everybody can learn a lot from that. Regarding your VC background and becoming a founder, was there like one learning you really had where you were like, okay, this really helped me in my founder journey?
from my background as a VC, you mean, with the mindset that I had before? Yeah. So I think as a VC, you obviously see a lot of different companies and you know how to speak the language of investors. So I knew how to speak to investors and how to pitch because I've seen a lot of people pitch to me. So I know what to look for. I know kind of how to, pitch it in a way that it is investable, right? So investors, they look at typically a few things. One is, of course, like, is the market big enough? Who is your founder team? So really like looking at the management. What is your business model? What is your vision? Like, how are you going to grow the revenues over time? What is your valuation? Like, having real clear, super sharp answers to typical questions and ways a VC looks at startups. And how can it be more scalable? Like, what's the competitors look like, and how do you distinguish yourselves from them? So I think that was super helpful, but it also was not helpful in some ways, because being a venture capital investor, almost my default mode of building a company was by backing it with external funding from investors, because that's what I was used to as a VC. And that's not necessarily the best way to build a company, right? You can also bootstrap a company and really focus on value and monetization as soon as possible. And that is where I made a big mistake, because when I was in VC, it was very much before I got back into VC now, it was very much, let's say, a bull market. So a lot of people were investing a lot of money, and there was a lot of liquidity in the market. So I saw founders get funding basically with a really nice pitch deck and a good team and a good story. They will already raise like 1 million from the market. And I thought, wow, if they can do it, then so can I, right? So I created a tight deck, and I got a nice team, and I made like an MVP, and then the market crashed. So this was around COVID times, I think it was 2020, and the stock market crashed, and all the investors that I was speaking to, they were like, yeah, we don't want to invest this year anymore, we want to wait it out. And suddenly I could see almost my company crumble in front of me, because it was very dependent on raising funding in order to build to, let's say, a minimum viable product or something like that. So I really had to go back to the drawing table and see, okay, how can we pivot? How can we make this a so-called default alive company, where it doesn't necessarily need external funding in order to be successful? And that was a big setback, to be honest. So I really looked into pivoting, maybe going from a B2C model to a B2B model, these kind of things. And I think my recommendation would definitely be for people who are considering to start a company, not to necessarily only look at investors to invest in your money, because there's plenty of companies who can build a really successful company, especially with the AI tools that are out there, where you can make a lot of money and you don't really need VC or investor money to build.
No, I think that's a really good point, and like a really good learning. I think that belongs to the downs, but also then to the ups. So that's the description of a roller coaster as a founder. Really interesting. I mean, you also mentioned that you saw like a lot of pitches as well. Would you say there's like a typical pattern regarding like how women pitch themselves versus how men pitch themselves? And is there like a recommendation you could give to women for like doing better pitches, or like maybe really like stand up for themselves more?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, because I don't want to generalize. But there are typical male behaviors and typical female behaviors, and of course there are exceptions, and of course you have also non-binary people, or people who don't identify as one or the other, right? So but when I worked for Rubio VC, which is a fund in Amsterdam, I saw both men and women pitching. In the fund where I'm working now, we invest mostly in women. So I do see sometimes also men pitching because we can often invest in diverse teams. But I do observe a few differences, and this is also what's shown from the data. So one is that women tend to ask for less money and ask for lower valuations. So I once saw this really inspiring woman who was an amazing pitcher. And she basically gave the advice to every woman where whatever number you put a zero behind it. So don't be afraid to think big, and especially in Europe. I'm sure you've been in online and seen some of the articles in the US where they're much more about the go big or go home and the world domination and big valuations and these kind of things. And we can learn a lot from that within Europe, but also be, let's say, authentic and aligned to what we stand for. So I wouldn't recommend, okay, if you're raising 1 million, put a zero behind it and just raise 10 million. I don't think that's exactly what I recommend, but I do think that investors look for a certain ambition in, let's say, a forecast and say, okay, where will you be, let's say, in 10 years or maybe even in 5 years? And that it's okay to think a little bit bigger because it can be scary, and women tend to like to under promise and over deliver. So they want to promise something that they can actually deliver upon. Whereas I've seen behavior in men where they are just super easy with saying, oh yeah, this is going to be $1 billion company, no doubt about it. And they have like a really good poker face when they do that. So I think we can learn a lot from the men out there. So I would definitely encourage women to also have some male peers, friends, that they can challenge their pitch with and say, okay, how can I make this better? It's basically referred to as male allies, so to help women get ahead as well. So that's one thing when it comes to numbers. The second thing that is in the data, it's that women often are getting demoter questions from VC investors and investors, whereas men get promoter questions. I don't know if you've heard this research before.
No, and it's really interesting. No.
Okay, so what happens is if I'm a female founder pitching, typical question a VC investor, typically a male VC investor, would then answer or ask is, but what is your key competitor? And what is the key risk? And what if it doesn't work? Like all questions to make you feel smaller, or like looking at the risks. Whereas if a man pitches, typically the investor would ask promoter questions, like, for example, how can this get bigger? Or how can we expand to this other market? Like, what other products or what other markets can we achieve? So the trick on how to overcome this as a female founder, when you get a question that is a demoter question, you can answer it by saying, oh, that's an interesting question, but what would be even more interesting is to ask, how can it be bigger? So rather than you just answer a different question, it's almost like when a journalist asks you a question that you don't want to answer, you just flip and say what you want to answer. And sometimes it also helps to point it out, right? To say, okay, that does take some, you need to be brave for doing that. But to say, oh, I noticed that you're asking me on how it's smaller, but what I think is more interesting, to think bigger. So that, and then I think the third tip I can give is a really inspiring TEDx video, which I can forward to you afterwards. It's about imposter syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of that, but a lot of women, but I think also men have it. So it's like, am I good enough? And they're gonna find out at some point that I'm not really good enough, or I'm an imposter, right? And women are often associated with having this imposter syndrome. But you can also flip that narrative by saying, well, actually, I found a hack. I found a hack in, and I'm sort of leveraging on this imposter syndrome because I bring something very different to the table. I can forward the TEDx video because I'm not really explaining it the way that the TEDx person does, but I think it's really good.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think all you mentioned, all the 3 points. I think it's so interesting to have those. I mean, of course, are those exceptions, and you can't generalize it on every single person, of course. But I think it's really interesting because the data says like there are like some psychological patterns, like just women are more doing. So I think it's really interesting to have those. And I've not heard about the promoter questions regarding VC. So that's really interesting to see how this can turn a pitch or like a question catalog and to such a different direction. But I think it's a cool tip to just flip it around. So I think that's an advice everybody should listen to. Really cool to have in mind because I think that can really help you um, get an interview or just like a talk the way you want it to. Regarding your current job at Borski Fund, I think it's really interesting because now you're like in the venture capital industry still, but how you mentioned as well, more focused on women based businesses, startups. So like they can also have like diverse teams, of course, but there's a focus on women empowering. What was your initial journey to from being the founder to go back to the VC and then especially in this industry?
I think a couple of things. So I this woman that I mentioned all the way in the beginning of this podcast, we actually set up a network together in 2012, which is 13 years ago, which was called Old Girls Network. So it was the idea to become like the anti thing of the Old Boys Network, or actually the equal thing of the Old Boys Network, where women help each other more to come ahead and to get promoted, rather than the current situation, which was actually research also showed that when a woman would be, let's say, on top in an organization, in a board or something, she had to work really hard for it and she had no help. So she feels that junior women also should work hard and do it themselves like she did, rather than helping them sort of break through the glass ceiling. So our key objective was for women to help women get ahead, just like men are doing a little bit more naturally. And from this network, which was a really long time ago, like 13 years ago, I still have really great relationships with a lot of the mentors in the network. And one of the mentors was Simone, who is the founder of this Borski Fund that I'm currently working for, and also Laura, another co-founder of hers. And last year they basically just invited me over for a coffee because I had announced that my startup had sort of merged with another startup, and that was an interesting development, I guess, for them to have a coffee with me. And then they sort of ambushed me and said, "We want you to work for us again." And I wasn't even sure I wanted to be back in VC back then, but they said, "Oh, it's okay. You can just start for 2 days a week as a venture partner." And now I'm working full time with them, so they completely overtook me. But I do feel super aligned with the mission of helping reducing the gender inequality gap. Because as a founder, I did come across a lot of those biases that I mentioned before to you, but also I was very directly confronted with it when my startup. So my startup was a startup that I co-founded with a male co-founder, but neither of us had, let's say, a network of rich angel investors. I had a lot of VCs in my network, but VCs typically don't invest in a startup that is just getting started. You first need angel investors, and I didn't really have that many angel investors in my network back then. Now I do, but I needed to nurture those relationships from day one. And my startup actually was merged with another startup from the UK, where it was with 3 male men, and I mean, I had a good click with them, but it was also a little bit confronting to me to see that they had a network of billionaire investors, and basically they would go to a certain party and then have a drink with these investors, and then after the party they would transfer a lot of money, like millions. So I was like, whoa, that is really a different way of operating. I learned a lot from them, but I also noticed, like, me as a former venture capital investor was already experiencing these barriers. And I cannot imagine what it would be like for a lot of women out there who don't even have any idea of angel investments, VC investments, or anything like that. And I think it is important to level the equal playing field, because we're missing a lot of innovations in the world, because female innovations that, for example, are tailored to female health, they don't get investments because a lot of investors, they don't see the problem because they don't experience, let's say, a perimenopause app or some sort of mother app or some other application that is tailored to women, because they don't see the problem, and then it's easy to then say, maybe I don't invest in this because I don't know this market very well. So it really strengthened me, this experience as a female founder, working then also with a male team to help other women get funding and to reduce that gender inequality gap. So less than 2% of the venture capital goes to female founder only teams, and more than 80% of the capital goes to all male teams. And then there's this small gender diverse teams where there's male and female. I think they receive the rest of the VC capital, and that is just not acceptable. So how do we solve that? We solve that by also helping more women to invest, because we know that women are more inclined to invest in other women. So we do invest alongside other female general partners, but also female angel investors. We invest in female founders and also in diverse teams. So it can be one female founder with multiple male co-founders. And in female innovations, because we believe that those are also underfunded. And the research actually shows, great news, that diverse teams outperform. So they get better revenues, they get better returns over time, and they get less funding. So there's a bit of a weird, I think, opportunity also for investors to invest more in women.
I think that's really interesting, and all like the studies you mentioned. I think it just underlines how important this topic is and how much possibilities and chances there are. But you have also like a network generated in Portugal, how I also saw. So I think that's really cool that you give like people the chance to just come together. Is there like one thing which is, in your opinion, like the most important thing to get through a network? Like, is there something would you say like, okay, if you go to a network, that's what you like should be aware of, and that's a benefit you can get, and you really have to be open for that? Is there like an advice you would give to people?
I think networking in general, it can feel a little bit socially awkward, I think, in the beginning. But over time, your network is your net worth. So like I just gave that example of these male founders that I know that have all these billionaire friends. It's so easy for them to get funding because they know those people, and it's a relationship game where you have to nurture those relationships at parties or at the golf club or wherever, and it's not like investors, they like to be valued not just for the money but for themselves as a person, and maybe what they can bring to the table in terms of the advice that they can give. So often there's this saying, ask for advice and get investment, whereas if you ask for investment, you get advice. There's this reversed psychology happening. My recommendation would definitely be to focus on building relationships authentically. So focus on what is who am I, what do I stand for, and how do I connect to the other person, but while also staying true to myself. And I believe in karma, so I think you need to also help other people. Like, for example, this Old Girls Network that I built a long time ago, which is almost, 13 years ago. I did that as a volunteer thing because I really loved helping other women get ahead and get connected to other mentors. But I still reap the benefits from doing that volunteer work, let's say 12 years ago. So you build up goodwill, and with relationships, I think was it Bill Gates or Warren Buffett has this really good saying about it. It takes years to build a good relationship, but it can be, your reputation can be lost in 2 seconds, right? So be aware, because people do talk with each other, and karma comes back around is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know, I am a naturally curious person. So I always feel like any person that I'm speaking to, I can learn something from. And I think if you adopt that mindset, you will build a lot of beautiful relationships in life with unexpected people, not necessarily people that you want something from, but maybe you can give them, and I don't know, it also comes back in the end, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing tip and advice to have this mindset and this thought in mind. I think we're almost at the end, but we have like a typical question I always ask. It's like an advice you would give your younger self from your perspective nowadays.
Patience, my friend. Because I was, like you, a very eager young professional, and I thought that school kind of teaches us that if you study hard, you get a good grade, and it's like a linear line going up, like you do your bachelor, then you do your master, then you get a good job, then you get promotion, and it's like one line going up. And that's not how life works, and that's not how careers work. So rather than seeing it as a sprint, it is a marathon. And I would be patient, like Yoda says. So have the guts to sometimes do something completely different, like go to Africa and do volunteer work, or like make a total different career move compared to what is like the normal trajectory for someone with your studies, because it will broaden your mind, and the older you get, the less risk-taking you will be. And I think those early career experience, they shape you so much in who you are. Like, for example, living abroad for a little while, indeed, like doing something completely different. I think it's really important to allow yourself, while you're growing as a professional and as a human being, to take a step back, to zoom out, to have the patience and the trust that in the end, you will get to where you need to be.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. I think it was like a really, really interesting episode, and a lot of learnings and advice, especially about the VCs and how to pitch. I think everybody can really grow from those experiences. So thank you so much for sharing. I think it was really valuable.